As many of you know, I happen to love laughing. And I think that laughing is just such an important part of life. It really is. And I absolutely love sharing laughter as well. As many of you know, I post a meme literally every single day on my various social media platforms because these are things that I find funny, and I want to share what I find funny, makes me smile with my friends and colleagues and people out there. You know, the benefits of laughter are really tremendous from multiple different perspectives. Certainly from a health perspective, no question. As a matter of fact, I was just reading an article just this week. Bear with me for 1 second. There are a whole bunch of people that have to be admitted. There we go. So I was reading an article actually just this weekend about something that I thought was really, really fascinating about dad jokes. And I happen to believe that I'm one of the king of dad jokes. But what the article was saying was that dad jokes are actually incredibly valuable and powerful for helping kids grow up resilient. When kids are used to dad jokes, which we all know are thoroughly embarrassing, that creates a certain resilience amongst them and for them, which can be very, very powerful and helps them for life in general. And that's something that I think is just so incredibly valuable and important about the concepts of comedy and the concepts of laughing. So today we're going to be talking about that intersection of comedy and not-for-profit fundraising. And I want to welcome my guest today, comedian Mark Schiff. And you know, I can tell you all about him. You probably read a little bit about him in the bio that I sent out. But I actually want to open up to today's discussion with a question to Mark, and that is, who is Mark Schiff? Again, Mark, you've written an amazing book, which is over here. Whoops, none of you can see it, but it's over here. I'm showing it to you.
There you go. There you go.
There you go. Look what Mark did. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
If you don't know, that's me in the middle. That's my mother. That's my father. That's my bar mitzvah picture. That's on the cover. Why Not? Lessons on Comedy, Courage, and Chutzpah.
And we're going to be talking about Mark's book a little bit later. But actually a very, very important housekeeping note. Thank you, Mark, for reminding me. We're actually going to be giving a copy of Mark's book away to one of our lucky attendees today. But what I need to ask for everybody to please do is to please put in the chat the number of letters in your last name. So put in the chat the number of letters, count them up, the number of letters in your last name. Okay, hold on to that. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. Okay, so now turning back to Mark. Okay, Mark, could you tell our audience who you are, how you got to the points that you're at today from a comedy perspective, what's inspired you what inspired you to become a comedian, and most importantly, why do you honestly think that you're funnier than me?
Right. Well, with your dad jokes, I may not be. That's I want to hear. I want to hear your meme for the day and your one dad joke later. Who am I? You know, it's like talking to Sophocles here. Who am I? You know, Plato. I'm a kid from the Bronx. I started in the Bronx, and I grew up there, lived there 9 years. Then we moved to Forest Hills, and the comment. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids, 3 boys, 1 wife. You know, due to the old-fashioned way, I got married, didn't have the kids. I tell you about so anyway, as far as my comedy life is, my parents, when I was 12 years old, they took me to a nightclub in Regal Park, Queens, and Rodney Dangerfield was on the show. He was the opening act, the great Rodney Dangerfield. And when I was 12 years old, I'd never seen a comedian before in my life. And I said, that's it. I had an epiphany. I said, that's it. I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to be a comedian. And I never looked back. Never looked back. And when I was 18, I started going to nightclubs and talking to comedians, and they told me how to do this. If you ever want to be a comedian, this is it. Write original material, memorize it, and go find an audience somewhere. But do not tell the jokes to your wife, your mother, your father, your kids, your friends, because they'll lie to you. You got to find strangers. and who don't know who you are, and they'll let you know if you're funny or not. And I started doing this when I was 18. I started doing it. I had terrible stage fright. I stopped after my first show and didn't get on stage again for 5 years. And then I started studying ballet and tap dancing and jazz dancing and writing classes. And that was basically, and then when I was 23, I went back to it. And I started with Jerry Seinfeld, Paul Reiser, these guys, and I'm, as of today, still on tour with Jerry Seinfeld. Been on tour with him for 20 years. We was just in New York at the Beacon Theater for 4 shows 3 weeks ago, and then we're in Texas for 4 shows. And I'll be with him in Florida in about 3 weeks. So that's really it, you know. And I've always been paid for my writing as a stand-up comedian. And I wrote this book, so you know that's where that. And my wife, like all comedians, if you know anything about comedians, if we're married, we use our wives as the butt of a joke, and if you're a woman, you use your husband. And I have a wife that can handle it very well. When I get off stage and if she's in the audience, people say to her, "Is that all right with you that he says those things about you?" And she says, as long as he's getting paid, it's okay with me. So that's the deal. So I hope I answered some of your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Again, just a reminder, if you haven't put the number of letters in your last name in the chat, please do so now. There's going to be something we're going to be doing at the end, but we kind of need that very, very crucial confidential information, you know, for that. It's very, very confidential. So just, you know, don't tell anyone. Okay, so Mark, I want to change gears just slightly. You know, part of the reason for us getting together today in this webinar is really to talk about that intersection between comedy and fundraising. And the reality is, I want to ask you this question. You know, in what ways do you feel that as a comedian, or in reality, I would argue almost any type of entertainment and different types of entertainment, how do you feel that they impact organizations positively, negatively? In what ways can organizations either benefit or, on the flip side, not benefit by engaging somebody like yourself to come to one of their events, whether it's a dinner, whether it's a private thank you event, or what have you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. My experience with that is when I get hired, if it goes well, which it usually does, and I do a good show and people are laughing their heads off, there's a good chance they will come back next year to see what is going on. But if you hire the wrong comedian or the wrong act and ruin the people's night, you're going to lose a great percentage of your audience. You really got to be careful who you hire. And especially in corporate world, I happen to work clean. I don't curse or do politics or go into a lot of areas. That's my choice. And I'm just out to entertain. So people say, you know, I'll get letters from these organizations and say, you know, what a great show that was. And people are great. Already people, you know, would like to see you again, which means they want to come back. So leave them laughing. Let them have a good time. I've seen comedians go on and just ruin people's nights. Sometimes it's really something, and including, you know, if you get singers that babble too long, or you hire, you know, these magicians that take 20 minutes to set up a trick, you know, and you know, so you got to really be careful. But that's really the way I see it. And I tell people, if they don't hire me for the money, I'll say to them, listen, I'm willing to help you. Let me know who you want to hire, and I'll let you know if it's right for your organization. Because I hate to see people ruin a good thing.
So you're saying that there are different comedians, different acts that will work differently and better in different, you know, for different organizations and in different situations?
Oh yeah, I know 1 or 2 that got pulled off the stage. You know, during a corporate event, they just said, listen, let's stop this right now. You know, if you tell a comedian, I'm not bad-mouthing comedians, listen, I love comedians and everybody has, but we're not right for every situation. I did a show in Detroit and it was to raise money for an orphanage. And it was a Catholic orphanage and there were priests and nuns in the audience. And the guy that went on before me was filthy. He ruined the whole night, you have to know your audience. That's when I do a lot of Jewish events. I say, listen, I know who your audience is and I know what they would like. You have to have a sensitivity to the crowd.
Right. It's actually very interesting. A good number of years ago, I was working on a dinner for an organization actually based in LA. It's actually going to be a question that's going to come up in a minute, but it was a very, very well-known cancer organization. And we happened to have had Larry King, who's not a comedian, but we had Larry King as the MC. And Larry King decided at the end of the evening, he was going to end off the evening with a joke. And he started telling this joke, and I still remember to this day standing on the sides of the event space, listening to Larry as he started to speak, and like, oh no, where is this going? This is going in and I had the sense that the joke was going in a direction that really would not work for our crowd.
Right.
At the end, he landed up, there was a twist, and everybody's minds obviously were in the gutter. But Larry finished it off with a joke that was frankly absolutely hilarious,
Yeah.
but it caused a lot of panic for us as organizers. There were a good number of clergy in the audience, and created a lot of panic. But again, thankfully, at the end of the day, he was a professional. He turned it around, and it was fantastic. But from an organizer's perspective, that can be very, very scary.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No. By the way, Larry King. I had a joke. I worked with him one night. It's funny. My wife, I had this gig up in San Francisco, and my wife gave birth that morning, and I had to leave like an hour later and fly to San Francisco and meet Larry King for an event. And I did this joke. It wasn't even the greatest joke, but he thought it was the funniest thing he ever heard in his life. And every time I saw him, when he was with somebody else, he made me do the joke for these other people. And I'll tell you what it was. The joke was, when an Amish kid is bad, what can you take away from him? He has nothing. What are you going to say to the kid? Give me that hat and no more hay rides. And Larry thought that this was unbelievably hysterical. I'll never forget. God bless that guy. He was, you could find him every morning in Nate Now's having breakfast.
Yes. I used to walk past all the time and see him there.
He held court. Yeah.
Amazing.
Never asked Larry King for marriage advice. He was married 10 times.
Right. So let's talk for a moment about a little bit about your process. So when you're working with an organization on different types of events, which generally I'm assuming are typically fundraising events or gratitude events. I think I actually worked with you once on a gratitude event, actually for the same cancer organization. It was you, Elan Gold, and Dan Adut. You guys were absolutely hysterical. And it really made an incredible experience for every single person who was there. There was no pressure about fundraising, although to be honest, we landed up raising I think $10,000 or $15,000 that night without frankly even trying. So comedy really plays a very, very important role. But what I want to ask is what's your process, specifically as far as working with an organization? Do you come up with new jokes each time? Do you write something new that's very, very specific to the organization, individuals working within the organization, volunteers, board members, etc.? Or do you typically use what I would call, quote unquote, one of your standard acts in those type of situations?
Right. So I will sprinkle in some stuff about the organization, but routines that we've worked on for years and years, true and tried and solid gold routines. That's really what the people want to hear. What the organization sometimes they goes, we got Mel Goldberg here, who's the president. Why don't you make fun of him? And it's a very thin line what to do with these people. But I do write some stuff for the organization. I'll read about them online. I'll ask them to send me stuff. I'll meet with a couple of board members, usually like this through Zoom or a phone call in the old days, you know. We'll do a phone call and get together. Another very important thing about setting up these events is where they put you in the event, the performer. This could be death for the performer. I've had where they have 3 hours of stuff before I get on. The audience is wasted, exhausted. They want to go home, and it's tough. I had one recently. I did a thing at an event at somebody's house, and they wanted to put me on like 2 hours after it started. I said no, and they put me on early, and it was terrific. So you got to know where you're placing the act for the night. Very, very important.
Got it. Got it. I mean, Mark, you know, what that organization that you told me about, that you just spoke about, they actually told me that the real reason they put you at the end is that they're hoping you weren't even going to talk.
Hey, wow. There you go. I've, you know, some of these events, you would think they're also, if you're putting an event together, a very important thing, and this is where they skimp sometimes, is the sound. I don't want to get too technical with you, but bad sound, bad show. People sitting in the audience go, I can't hear him, or it's all muffled, or it's too loud. And I work with them specifically on the sound. In fact, in my contract, I have a rider, and I list the type of sound that I would like, specifications for it. And I send it to them, and then they'll go, well, you know, can we, and we'll talk, and they'll come up with something good. I've shown up at jobs where there's no microphone. They go, all right, guy, where's the microphone? I didn't know you needed one. There's 600 people. Yeah, do you mind?
So what do you do in a situation like that? How do you as a professional handle such a situation where it's not your fault? You know, you told them exactly what you needed. They didn't do what they needed as an organization. How do you handle such a crazy situation like that?
You do the best you can and know that in the end, if it doesn't go well, they're going to blame you. Even if they didn't do what they were supposed to do, like get the right equipment and this and that, they're going to blame you for it, and you'll never be back, which is, you know, that's the thing about performers. Every day we're starting a new business. You know, there's something to be said when you work for a company and you know where you're going every day. Every day I start, I got to, you know, rebuild the shop, which is okay because I don't want to work. I don't want a regular job. Never did.
Understood. So let's change gears yet again.
You know, by the way, one time about not having a job, I remember I was with Jerry Seinfeld, and we went to a meeting in this office building, some sort of pitch meeting, and we come out, we look at each other and go, you know, those people have to stay in that building all day. Like, and we talked about it. We said they can't leave. How can, and we felt so blessed that we could go walking around in the afternoon in the sunlight. I don't want to, you know, nothing against work, but for me, comedians, we don't do well with other people.
So listen, so far you're doing great with our audience.
Because I know we're not going to be together for the next 16 years. So
crazy. So as I was saying, let's switch gears for just a moment.
Yes.
I'd like to ask you to tell. And by the way, I just want to also mention that, you know, if anybody has any questions, you know, just raise your hand in the chat. You know, Mark will. I may have to feed him the answers, but Mark will be happy to answer.
He tried so hard to be funny, doesn't he, folks? Doesn't he try?
Yeah, but you know what? You're smiling every time I make a little joke. You smile. That's the dopamine hit I'm getting. You know, so you know, I have to tell you though, it's just one of my favorite experiences. I know a decent number of comedians, and a good number of years ago. When I say a good number, a handful of years ago, actually. I still remember it was the Jewish New Year. I was sitting in synagogue, and the person who happened to be sitting right in front of me was none other than Sacha Baron Cohen. Mm-hmm. The president got up to give some sort of announcement. He said something, and I made a joke. And all I can tell you, I just remember this so clearly, Sacha Baron Cohen turning around to me, smiling and say, that was a good one. And let me tell you, from my perspective, that feels pretty darn amazing. And I always view it as my goal in life to make people like Mark Schiff laugh. Because then I know that I've, that my dad
You're
jokes
onto something, right?
yeah, they're fantastic,
You know, the
so
other day on Shabbos, my Rabbi Muskin, he was talking about Passover. And he goes, if you're going to leave town, you got to give me the keys to your house. He goes, you put in an envelope and just put your name on it. Don't put your address. He goes, I also need the alarm code to your house. And I yell out, you want my bank numbers too? Big laugh there. You know, it's insane. So when you can, you gotta get the little joke in there.
absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that as well. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. We actually have a question from Susan about the trophies in the room that you're in. Are what's the story there? Was that a real trophy, or is that a participation trophy for you?
Those are, I'm in my, all three of my kids moved out of the house. Thank God, they're all gone. They were living here with me. Actually, when they were in their early 20s, all three were here. And I realized we didn't have 3 children. We had 3 very poor people living with us. So those are all the kids' trophies for doing very little. They give trophies to everybody, just showing, hey, you get a trophy here you go, for, striking out. So, but I will show you something that actually is one of my trophies. This here, I don't know if you can see this. Okay, so the greatest playwright that ever lived practically is Neil Simon. And he wrote a play called The Odd Couple, which became a TV show. So this is a copy of the play that he signed to me. It says here, to Mark, good luck with your wonderful play, Neil Simon. I wrote a play and Neil Simon came to see my play and then spent 10 minutes talking to me about it and actually gave me changed the ending of my play for me. And it started getting standing ovations every night.
Incredible.
So that's something in my life that is so incredible. I'll never forget. I wish you, if I had one wish, something that I would love to go back to 1975 to a brand new Neil Simon play in a Broadway theater and sit there with 1,200 people and listen to those laughs. Nobody wrote jokes like Neil Simon.
Wow, amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move from Neil Simon to a TV show that I grew up with. And I wanted to ask you a question about it. So I grew up with Full House. That was one of my favorite shows as a kid. And Bob Saget, who played Danny Tanner, was absolutely hysterical.
Right.
And I know that you knew Bob personally.
Yes.
But when you look at Bob was that wholesome TV dad.
Yeah.
He was just such an incredible, just an amazing, he was the model father that everybody wanted. And then I saw one of his stand-up comedy shows. And I have to tell you something, there are sailors and politicians who would be embarrassed by the language that Bob would use.
Right.
So my question to you is how, you bill yourself as a clean act. Does that hurt you in the realm of comedy when you're working with other organizations, different organizations? Does it hurt you? Does it benefit you? What is the difference from a professional perspective between a comedian who tells quote unquote these dirty and in the case of Bob Saget's absolutely filthy jokes,
Right.
versus somebody who gets up there and exactly what you're getting, where the organization doesn't have to have a conversation with you in advance
Right.
about, hold on, there's certain things you can't say.
Right. So Bob, like a lot of TV people, when he was on stage, that's really who he was. When he did the show, that's a character that they wrote for him. And Bob was one of the nicest guys in the world. It's sad that he left. Bob could not do corporate events, really. He could not do corporate events, no matter how famous he is. But he was a big star, so people would come to see him and knew what they were getting. But he used to joke about that on stage, like, you're not going to believe what I have to say here tonight. This is not the, Full House thing there. That's the way it is with a lot of comedians. They have their shows. Jerry Seinfeld is not like that. He works very clean. And even though, on the show, whatever. And Paul Reiser and a lot of guys who had TV shows, they pretty much stay in that character. Bob is one of those guys. But I have nothing against, and if people are going to pay to come see you, it's one thing, but in the corporate events, they're not paying to see you.
Right. Interesting. You're a part of the program, but you're not the program, as opposed to a comedy show that you're going to where you are literally the program.
That's right. You buy you're not buying a Bob Saget ticket. Like when you go to a corporate event. Oh, Bob Saget's there. We'll go. But corporation, the fundraising event is really where it's at.
Got it. Okay. One of the other things that that I do want to talk to you about is, I mentioned earlier that I worked for a cancer organization, very, very well known. It's actually a global organization, does phenomenal work. How do you, and how do other comedians in general, how do you deal with the tricky situation of how do you tell jokes about cancer? I'll put it bluntly, because listen, cancer isn't exactly funny, yet at the same time, you speak to cancer patients, they love laughing. Not all of them for sure, but a lot of them very often love joking about the fact that they do have cancer, which is, it's a bizarre, it's right. Probably a coping mechanism more than anything else. But how do you go about, telling those types of jokes, if you do, or how do other comedians handle that type of situation in the best possible way, so that it's not, it doesn't create a huge scandal, for the organization?
So I could not do that. It's funny when I do these events where there's some illness attached to it. I do have routines on doctors that I do, but I don't mention any specific disease. I would have to tell you this. If somebody's going up at an event that's raising money for cancer, the only one that can really, really joke about it is somebody who has had cancer. And they can do that. For me to go up would be almost impossible. I just can't.
So it's like that old Seinfeld routine with the dentist that Jerry can't tell dentist jokes, right? But dentist can tell dentist jokes. And then I remember in the scene the dentist converts to Judaism so he can tell Jewish jokes,
right?
Which was again obviously a whole routine.
Yeah, that's it's funny. You can YouTube it. There's a YouTube of Seinfeld, Chris Rock, one or two other people. And they're all talking, not Jerry, other people are talking about how they can make the N-word funny, that they think it's a funny thing. And they asked Jerry, what do you think, Jerry? And he goes, I don't think there's anything funny about it at all. He came across a hero in that little video. He said, there's no way that I can make that funny. What's funny about it? And with Chris Rock sitting there and other people. So you got to know your limitations with your crowd. But on the other hand, no matter how many clean shows I've done, when I do a Chabad gig, the rabbi will grill me before I do it. Even though I have 50 letters from other Chabad rabbis, they're very cautious about what's going on there, and rightfully so. Got it. Because what happens is, in these events, you make them look like an idiot. If they hire you and they got 150, 200 people sitting out there that believe in them, and all of a sudden this comedian comes up and he's absolutely awful. They look at the rabbi like, what the hell is wrong with you? How'd you hire this guy? Didn't you vet him? Right.
Huh, amazing. So actually you've given me a great segue into another question that I had. Was actually somewhat of a question from one of our audience members in advance. Joey asked the question, but I'm going to try actually change it just ever so slightly. What is the absolute, without naming names, this is, we got to keep this is a safe space. Without naming names, what are some of the craziest situations and organizations that you've ever worked with some of the weirdest, most bizarre requests or interesting situations that you've ever experienced?
Right. So I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to show you something else here, by the way. This is my first book. It's called I Killed: True Stories of the Road by America's Top Comics. And in here, there's 200 stories by comedians about the weirdest, most bizarre things that happened to them when they were on the road. I Killed: True Stories of the Road. And so every comedian's gone through, you know, strange things that have happened. It's very live. One that comes to mind for me is one night I did this religious Jewish event. I think it was a Chabad event. And the honoree went up before me. And the honoree had suffered some things. His parents died, and he was struck with, he had a stroke, and he went up and he screamed about how much he hated God for 20 minutes. And then I had to follow him. But it was really serious. Like, this guy was completely out of his mind, just screaming and ranting. And then they go, now the comedy up. And my opening joke was, by the way, I wrote that for him. And I got this big laugh, this huge laugh. It just let the air out of the balloon. It was great. One night I was up at Annenberg. You know who they are? The very wealthy family. I think they own TV Guide. They had a mansion in Bel Air. When I got there, I had to go to the men's room. And as I'm walking to the little bathroom, I look at this painting on the wall. And I look at who signed it, and it's signed by Rembrandt. And somebody's watching me, and I go, who signed this? They go, Rembrandt. I go, the Rembrandt? And they had it in a little corner somewhere. It's probably worth $40 million. But anyway, that aside, I did my show. When I went to do my show, I always look at the room first. And they had a mural that somebody painted. Giant mural, like 14 feet long. And a concentration camp scene with Jews on the fence, like dead. And I see a microphone in front of it. And I said, what's that mic for? They go, that's where you're going to perform. You mean I'm going to perform in front of that mural with, you know, and it was horrible. It was, you know, I'm doing this show with this horrible scene behind me. You got to set it up right, folks. One night, a guy chased me off stage. I said he said something to me. I came back, and we're trained. Comedians are trained. We're Marines or Green Berets. When somebody says something, we can just nail them, you know, to the floor. That's our early training. And I said something to this guy. He was on a date. I cut his manhood in half, and he got up and chased me out of the club. He was yelling, "I'm going to kill you."
Wow. Wow.
I had a mobster one night grab me and throw me against you remember cigarette machines? I don't know if you people are old enough to know cigarette machines. He threw me against a cigarette machine. He said, tell me a joke, and if I don't like it, I'm going to punch you in the face. Unbelievable. So I told him this stupid Polish joke. I said, you know, when you're in Poland and you go see a play, how come nobody can see the play? He said, why? I said, because everybody's sitting behind a pole. And he started laughing. He said, yeah, it was funny. He let me go. So those are little things that happen.
Wow. So maybe you should change the title of your first book. Not I Killed, it should be I Almost Got Killed.
Yeah. Well, you know the expression I killed is like when a comedian comes off stage, people go, how'd it go? I killed him.
Right.
I slaughtered them. That's what comedians say. We I murdered them. So.
Fantastic. So we only have a few more minutes left. So I wanted to ask if anybody has any additional questions. And actually before we do that, before we open for questions again. Again, if you have not put the number of letters in your last name in the chat, please do so now, because the secret will shortly be revealed. So please make sure you put, again, the number of letters in your last name, put it in the chat, and we will go from there. So any questions from our audience?
Please, folks.
Please, he's desperate for the attention.
This is a rare chance to talk to a comedian and an author. Ask me anything you want.
And not just any type of author, an author whose book is #1 on Amazon and has been for how many weeks now, Mark?
It was #1 on Kindle about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it was really great. It's amazing. I can't believe I wrote this and it's doing well.
Fantastic. Okay, so I see we don't have any questions, unless everybody's sending them telepathically.
Lev, you don't have anything for me?
Nothing? You guys have no questions? Mark, I have to tell you, that shows you how amazing you are. Although Joey just unmuted, so I think Joey's about to come in with a question.
Come on, Joe.
Oh, well, hi, Mark. I was going to ask you about the book. What's your favorite story? We're going to skip pages in the book. What page would we skip to? What's your favorite story that you recount in the book?
Oh, I really have so many. That's a great question. I'm doing a reading this week. I'm doing a show reading. There's a story in there, the night that Bob Dylan came to my house. That's one of my favorite stories. I saw him at a nightclub. He was at a show, and I said to him, "Hey, Bob, I'm a big fan. You want to come to my house and have a cup of tea?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll be there." And I learned a great lesson from that. I've asked other people, big stars, Katharine Hepburn, I asked them for things, and just, of course, they trusted me. They said yes to things. So the one about Bob Dylan, the one about my father, there's a story in there about my father coming to see me do a show 2 weeks before he died. We knew he was going to pass, and he knew it. And he said, "I want to see you one more time. Can I come see you tonight?" And it's a very touching story about the last time my father came to see me upstate New York. So there's a lot of stuff in there. I think you appreciate it. Thank you for the question.
Mark, there's a question that came up, which I think we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. It's a question from Jennifer. And it says, how would you start writing material for a particular group that you may not be prepared for? Or is a lot of the material reused over the years?
I don't understand. How would you write material for a group you're not used to?
In other words, Jennifer, do you want to jump in and clarify your
Please,
question?
Jennifer.
Sure. So basically what I was asking was, like, if there's a group that is asking you to speak, you're not used to that particular group for whatever, you're doing. How would you go about just preparing the material? I mean, obviously there's research and stuff to know what's going on, but is there anything deeper that you would do just to kind of get more background, or are you using bits from this show and that show to kind of fill your 20 minutes?
So, yeah. So because I have a lot of material, I can take something and shape it for the event without having to write a brand new bit. You see, the thing that people don't understand is it takes so long to craft a piece of material. It could take years, a good year. You have to do it hundreds of times before it's really in shape. So one thing you can do is always mention something about where you are. I'll give you an example. I did a show recently in Springfield, Illinois, the home of Abe Lincoln. And I actually went to the Abe Lincoln Museum that morning before the show. And I just mentioned to the crowd, I said, I went to the Lincoln thing, and all these pictures they have of Abe Lincoln with that hat, that stovepipe hat. I said, you notice that the hat really did not catch on? Like, nobody's wearing that hat. Like, there's every picture has it, but that's one hat that for some reason people go, nah, yeah. So I talked about Abe Lincoln's hat and going to the museum, and they were endeared to me right away because they knew I did something in the area. I'm aware of their surroundings. I'll give you another example. If I'm going to Orange County to do a show, and I'll say, yeah, I live in Los Angeles. It's nice to be in Orange County. I left 3 days ago to get here. You know, they know because of the traffic is so bad. So right away, they know that I know what I'm talking about.
Well, talking about traffic, Mark, I actually want to switch to a question from Lev, who's in the Valley, which no one goes to.
Sorry, Lev.
So Lev, can I embarrass you and ask you to ask Mark the question directly?
Sure. My question is, how did Jews become so intertwined with comedy? Where did that start, or how did that? I mean, the Bible is
Great
not a very
question.
funny book.
Okay, so that's a great question too. Jews were not known. There's a great book. It's The Hidden Smile, I think, by Lawrence Epstein. He talks all about this. This is the best book ever written on it. So before the 20th century, Jews were not considered funny people. They just weren't. And nobody thought we were funny. Also, in silent movies, there were no famous Jewish silent movie stars. Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, none of these guys were Jews. There were no funny Jews in silent movies. It wasn't until the advent of the microphone, when Jews could start talking and rattling off, stories and ideas. And in the 1960s, 85% of the stand-up comedians in the United States were Jewish. Imagine that. Such a small group of people, that Jews that lived in the United States. And it was Jews that I believe, and some other people, legitimized us to got other non-Jews to like us, stand-up comedians, because these non-Jews would be sitting at home in the Midwest. They'd never met a Jew before. They're watching Johnny Carson or Ed Sullivan, and here comes Alan King, and here comes Buddy Hackett, and here comes Shecky Green, and they're sitting there going, these Jews are really funny people. I like these people. So the stand-up comedians of those days had a lot to do with legitimizing us and getting people to like us and respect us. Make sense to you at all?
Very interesting. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is really all the time that we have for today. Before everybody goes, I just want to bring to your attention next month. I'm going to be doing my next webinar. That's going to be on Thursday, April 20th. I'm going to be sending out information about that. And that's going to be from 12 until 12:45 p.m. The topic of next month's webinar is the not-for-profit job market, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm going to be interviewing Willie Hochman from the Joel Poll Group, which is one of the premier executive recruiting firms in the not-for-profit world. Now, before we go, I'd asked everyone to please include the number of letters in their last name. We were very, very cryptic about it. We are now about to announce exactly what the reason was for doing that. So as you know, Mark has a #1 bestseller book called Why Not? And Mark, if you can hold it up, because I have it here, but it's not showing up
Why
on
not?
camera.
Lessons
There
on
you go.
comedy, courage, and chutzpah.
And I have a copy here that is actually reserved for one of
Hardback.
you.
Hardback.
And there you go. And the reason we were asking for the number of letters in your name is that the person with the most letters in their name is the person who's going to win a signed copy of Mark's new book. The winner is Alina Averick from Dallas, Texas. I will bring the book to you when I come to Dallas on May 14th for the dinner, or send it to you earlier. We'll see what happens. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining Mark and myself today. I hope you had an amazing time. I hope you learned a little bit along the way, and looking forward to seeing you next month for our next webinar. Thank you, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. And if you read the book and you have any questions, just email me. It's my, markschiff.com. You can write me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much, and have an amazing day.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Thank
Yes.
you.